very punctual to your time, I see. Very glad indeed. Delighted to have the pleasure of introducing you here at Longbourn. The Bennets of Longbourn, eh? Pray allow me to make you acquainted with my daughters. Come along, Jane. Miss Jane Bennet.
The eldest, though I cannot see why she must always have the chair nearest the window.
Hush, Lydia.
And the prettiest of all.
Mary, for goodness sake.
The next, Elizabeth.
Wittiest of all. Though Captain Tally of the regiment expressed her to be the most critical lady in Hertfordshire.
In the only complete sentence I ever heard him construct.
La.
And book in hand, as always, Mary.
The proudest. Pride is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I have ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed, and that there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or other, real or imaginary.
And
Vanity and pride are different things, so the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves. Vanity to what we would have others think of us.
Well, yes, quite so. And the two youngest, Kitty and Lydia.
Are we to only be the youngest? Have we no qualities?
We are the best dancers with the prettiest hats.
And sing most charmingly. Well, I do.
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet!
Mrs. Bennet, to be sure.
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, have you heard that Neverfield Park is let at last?
I have not.
But it is, for Mrs. Long has just been there and she told me all about it.
Probably an elderly bachelor with a King Charles Spaniel.
Indeed, Mr. Bennet. Do not you want to know who has taken it?
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
Mrs. Long says that Neverfield is taken by a young man of large fortune.
Really?
That he came down on Monday and was so delighted with it that he is to take possession before Michaelmas.
Married or single?
We might first inquire of the gentleman's name, Lydia.
Bingley.
But married or single?
Oh, single, my dears, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife.
However little known the views or feelings of such a man may be, the truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is believed the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters.
Oh dear.
Oh, hush, Lizzie. What a fine thing for our girls.
How so?
That he might marry one of us, Papa.
And is that his design in settling here?
Design? Nonsense. But it is not unusual that a young man may fall in love.
Though he must be a soldier in a regimental jacket.
You must visit him as soon as he comes.
You and the girls may go, or send them by themselves, which perhaps will be still better, for you are as handsome as any of them. Mr. Bingley might even like you the best of the party.
Well, I certainly have my share of beauty, but when a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over ideas of her own attractions.
In such cases, a woman has not often much attraction to think of.
Oh, but consider your daughters. Think what an establishment it would be for one of them. You must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit if you do not.
Oh, you are over-scrupulous, surely. I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to marrying whichever he chooses.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you take delight in fixing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves.
My dear, I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my oldest friends.
Ah, you do not know what I suffer.
Oh, but I hope you will get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighbourhood.
It will be no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not visit him.
Depend upon it, my dear. When they are 20, I shall visit them all.
Despite his protestations, Papa was among the earliest of those who waited on Mr. Bingley.
Capital, Lydia. I hope Mr. Bingley will like it.
We are not in a way to know what Mr. Bingley likes since you will not visit him.
Well, it isn't fair, Papa. Really, it isn't.
You forget that we shall meet him at the assemblies, and that Mrs. Long has promised to introduce him.
Do not believe Mrs. Long would do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own.
And plain as cakes, both of them.
Oh, she is a selfish, hypocritical woman. I've no opinion of her.
Indeed, but let us return to Mr. Bingley.
I would say I'm sick of Mr. Bingley.
Oh, my dear, why did you not tell me so? If I had known as early as this morning, I would not have called upon him.
Called on him? Called on him?
Truly, Father!
Oh, now see what an excellent father you have, girls. But I knew I should persuade you at last.
Yes, I fear that as I've actually paid the visit, we cannot escape his acquaintance now.
Everybody wanna steal my girl. Everybody wanna take her heart away. Couple billion in the whole wide world. Find another one, 'cause she belongs to me. She been my queen since we were 16. Walked the same things, dreamed the same dreams, alright. Alright. I ain't got it all, but she's the one. And mom calls me love, dad calls me son, alright. Alright. But I know, sure. Everybody wanna steal my girl. Everybody wanna take her all away. Put a million in the whole wide world. Find another one, she belongs to me. Everybody wanna steal my girl. Everybody wanna take her heart away. Put a million in the whole wide world. Find another one, she belongs to me. Na 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 na.
Oh, come, Darcy. I hate to see you standing there about yourself in this stupid manner. You had much better dance.
You know how I detest it unless I'm particularly acquainted with my partner. Besides, your sister is engaged and there is not another woman in the room who would not be a punishment to me to stand up with.
I would not be so fastidious as you are for a kingdom. I've never met so many pleasant girls in my life, and several uncommonly pretty.
Your partner, the eldest Miss Bennet, is the only handsome girl in the room.
Indeed, the most beautiful creature I've ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters just there who I say is very agreeable. Allow me to ask my partner to introduce you.
She is tolerable, but that is insufficient to tempt me. Pray return to Miss Bennet, you're wasting your time.
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, we have the most excellent ball. Oh, Jane is so admired, and Mr. Bingley danced with her twice. Then the third he turned to Miss King, and the fourth with Maria Lucas, and the fifth with Jane again.
If he had any compassion for me, he would not have danced half so much.
He is just what a young man ought to be. Sensible, good-humoured, lively, and I never saw such happy manners. So much ease with such perfect good breeding.
He is also handsome, which a young man should be if he possibly can.
Oh, I can hardly explain to you the shocking rudeness of Mr. Darcy.
Then how wise not to try, my love?
I was very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment.
Did not you? Compliments always take you by surprise, me never.
I can assure you that Lizzie loses nothing by not suiting that Mr. Darcy's fancy, for he's a disagreeable, horrid man.
But stern, my dear, tolerably stern.
You are a great deal too apt to like people in general. You never see fault with anybody. I swear, Jane, I never heard you speak ill of a human being in my life.
I would not wish to be hasty in censoring anyone.
Oh, your Mr. Darcy's so high conceited that there is no enduring him. I quite detest the man.
Your good sense to be so honestly blind to the follies and nonsense of others.
I always speak what I think.
Miss Bennet, might you consider a stroll about the room?
Within a short walk of Longbourn lived a family with whom we were particularly intimate.
Sir William Lucas, formerly in trade in Meryton, had made a tolerable fortune and risen to the honour of knighthood.
And gives 2 balls a season.
Lady Lucas was a very good woman and not too clever, which I find restful.
And your daughter Charlotte is my particular friend.
Truly an assembly ball is paradise to me.
Occupied as you are in observing Mr. Bingley's attentions to your sister, I think you do not suspect that you yourself have become, shall I say, an object of interest.
Indeed, where?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, all to my hearth and home. What more charming amusement for young people than the dance, eh? I consider it one of the first refinements of polished societies.
Any savage can dance, sir.
Wit, sir, wit indeed.
Do you not notice that Mr. Darcy seems always on the fringes of your conversation?
Mrs. Long told me last night that he sat close to her for half an hour without once opening his lips.
Miss Bingley told me that he never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances.
You waste the ball in idle chatter.
Note him.
He has an extremely critical eye, and if I don't begin by being impertinent myself, I should soon grow afraid of him. Did you not think, Mr. Darcy, that I expressed myself uncommonly well just now when I was teasing Colonel Foster to give us a ball at Meryton?
With great energy, but it is a subject which always makes a lady energetic.
My dear Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, surely you cannot refuse a dance with such beauty before you.
Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreat you not to suppose I moved this way in order to beg for a partner.
Might I hope for your hand in the next, Miss Bennet?
Mr. Darcy, in all politeness, but I must deny myself the pleasure.
Miss Bingley,
Mr. Darcy, I can guess the subject of your reverie.
I should imagine not.
You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in such society. And indeed, I am quite of your opinion.
La, I once wore a gown with 12 ribbons and a double rosette.
Oh, the incivility, the noise, the nothingness, and yet the self-importance of all these people. What I would give to hear your strictures on them.
Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you.
Oh? Ah.
I have been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Truly. Pray tell me what lady has the credit of inspiring such reflections.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
I confess I'm all astonished. How long has she been such a favourite? And pray, when am I to wish you joy?
I expected as much. A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love to matrimony in a moment.
Nay, I shall consider the matter as absolutely settled.
Sir William Lucas, to you!
Indeed, you're a scamp and rogue, Sir William. You will make me laugh.
You will have a charming mother-in-law indeed. And you will have the pleasure of her always being at Pemberley with you.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you must hear what this mischievous fellow was saying.
Miss Bennet, pray forgive even the appearance of unwanted attention, but might I request this reel?
Indeed, sir. It is rather an honour than a request.
The honour I believe to be mine.
It seems that Jane quite admires Mr. Bingley.
Noticeably, I would agree.
Mr. Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on.
But she does help him on as much as her nature will allow.
Remember, Eliza, that he does not know Jane's disposition as you do. Though they meet tolerably often, it is never for many hours together. Therefore, Jane should make the most of every moment she can command his attention.
Your plan is a good one, where nothing is in question but the determination to get a rich husband. These are not Jane's feelings, and she has no such design. She takes time, I think, to study his character.
Well, I wish her success with all my heart. And if she married him tomorrow, I think she had as good a chance of happiness as if she had studied his character for a 12-month. It is better to know as little as possible of the defects of the person with whom you would pass your life.
You make me laugh, Charlotte. But it is not sound, and you know full well you would never act in such a way yourself.
You were being watched.
Soon enough at Longbourn, Jane found herself in the receipt of an invitation from...
My dearest friend, if you would not be so compassionate as to dine with me.
We shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives. Come as soon as you can on receipt of this. We shall dine with my brother, as well as other gentlemen, and sundry officers.
Yours ever, Caroline Bingley.
With the officers! May Kitty and I go as well, Mamma? We should like to meet some sundry officers!
Am I mistaken that there was but one name on the invitation?
Oh, may I have the carriage, Father?
Of course.
Oh, indeed not. It would be much better, Jane, for you to ride, for the weather looks ill, and you might have the good fortune to be thoroughly soaked and stay longer with the Bingleys in ill health. Oh.
Mamma's hopes were answered. Jane had not been long gone when it rained torrents.
That was a lucky idea of mine indeed.
Miss Elizabeth, this has come from Netherfield, I think.
Dearest Lizzie,
I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suppose is to be imputed of my getting wet through yesterday. The Bingleys will not hear of my returning home until I am well.
though excepting a sore throat and headache, there is not much the matter with me. Yours, Jane.
Well, my dear, if our daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness and die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders.
Nonsense! People do not die of little trifling colds. And the inconvenience, Mr. Bennet, is worth the price.
She feels ill and I will go to her. I will walk. The distance is nothing and one is the motive. Only 3 miles.
Well, you cannot go jumping over stars and arrive with dirty stockings.
Jane at least will forgive me, Mother.
Oh, Mr. Bennet.
Miss Elizabeth, how remarkably good of you to come.
A pleasure, of course, Mr. Bingley. You can imagine that my sister's letter gave me some cause for concern.
Of course. And I wish I could answer that concern more favorably. See, your sister has slept ill, and though up, is not well enough to leave her room. I will take you to her. Go.
Lizzie! Jane, you were flushed. Should you not be in bed?
We have sent for the apothecary. I would be most grateful, Miss Elizabeth, if you would remain at Netherfield until your sister is quite well.
Oh, yes, do stay.
I will dispatch a servant to acquaint your family and return with any necessities, Miss Bennet.
Mr. Bingley, I cannot attempt to thank you.
Believe me, I have no pleasure in the world superior to that of contributing to yours, Miss Bennet.
Well?
He is most attentive.
Indeed he is. You look quite drawn, Jane. But I might say it serves exactly for falling in with Mother's advice.
Lizzie, how did you get here?
I walked.
Through the mud?
Through the mud, yes.
To walk 3 miles or 4 miles or whatever it is, above her ankles in mud, and alone, quite alone. What could she mean by it?
It seems to me to show an abominable sort of conceited independence and a complete indifference to decorum.
It shows an affection for her sister that is very pleasing.
I have an excessive regard for Jane Bennet, and I wish she were well settled. But with such a father and mother and Such low connections. I'm afraid there is no chance of it. Their uncle is an attorney in Meryton, and another lives somewhere near Cheapside.
If they had enough uncles to fill all Cheapside, it would not make them one jot less agreeable. Ah, Miss Elizabeth, a pleasure. Your sister improves, I hope.
She is resting, but hopes not to be thought unsociable.
Indeed not. I find it singular and intriguing that you prefer reading to cards, Miss Bennet.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet despises cards. She is a great reader with little pleasure in anything else.
I deserve neither such praise nor censure. I am not a great reader, and I have pleasure in many things.
In nursing your sister, you have pleasure, I am sure.
Here, please.
Is Miss Darcy much grown since the spring? How I long to see your charming sister again. Such manners and so accomplished for her age.
It is amazing to me how young ladies can have the patience to be very accomplished as they all are.
All? My dear child?
Yes, Caroline.
What do you mean?
All. I've never heard a young lady spoken for the first time without being informed that she was very accomplished.
I fear I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen in the whole range of my acquaintance that are really accomplished.
Then you must comprehend a great deal in your idea of an accomplished woman.
She must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing,
Drawing,
dancing,
languages,
and a certain something in her air and manner, the tone of her voice, expression, and address, or the word will be but half deserved.
And to all this, she must yet add something more substantial in the improvement of her mind by extensive reading.
I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder now that you're knowing any.
Well, excuse me, sister. Perhaps take to the pianoforte and favour us with a lively Scotch air.
Splendid! And perhaps Miss Bennet will seize the opportunity to show us a Scotch fling, simple seeming but difficult in the execution.
I found my thrill at Netherfield. At Netherfield. That's where I feel.
Will you essay, Miss Bennet?
I heard you before. You wanted me, I know, to say yes, that you might have the pleasure of despising my taste. But I always delight in treating a person of their premeditated contempt. I therefore made up my mind to tell you, I do not want to dance a reel at all. And now despise me if you dare. And is Mr. Darcy not to be laughed at?
There is, I believe, in every disposition a tendency to some natural defect, particular evil, which even the best education cannot overcome. And the wisest and best of men may be rendered ridiculous by a person whose first object in life is a joke.
Certainly there are such people, but I hope I am not one of them. I hope I never ridicule what is wise and good. Follies and nonsense, whims and inconsistencies do divert me, I own. But I laugh at these whenever I can. But these, I suppose, are precisely what you are without.
Perhaps that is not possible for anyone, but it has been the study of my life to avoid such weaknesses, which often expose a strong understanding to ridicule.
Such as vanity and pride.
Yes, vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is a real superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation. I have faults enough, but they are not a hope of understanding. My temper, I dare not vouch for, is too little yielding and perhaps resentful. My good opinion once lost is lost forever.
That is a failing indeed. But you have chosen your fault well. I really cannot laugh at it. You are safe from me.
As I said earlier, in every disposition there is some defect to a natural evil.
And your defect is the propensity to hate everybody.
And yours is to willfully misunderstand them.
returned home. Mamma, I fear, was not very cordial to them.
I cannot for the life of me see, Lizzie, why you had to rush Jane home.
I wasn't rushed, Mamma.
Well, I, for one, am gratified. Our evening conversation has lost much of its animation and almost all of its sense.
Mr. Bennet?
Oh, pooh.
My dear, I hope you have ordered a good dinner today, for I've reason to expect an addition to our family party.
Oh, is it Mr. Bingley? Why, Jane, you never dropped a word of this, you sly thing.
It is not Mr. Bingley. It is my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases.
But why, Papa?
It is the entail, Kitty, the entail of which I must often remind you. The inheritance of my property is limited to male heirs, and I, having produced none, my cousin Mr. Collins has become the legal recipient.
Oh,
now,
pray do not talk of that odious man and this odious legality. It is monstrous that your estate should be entailed away from your own children.
Mr. Collins was punctual to his time.
Ah, Mrs. Bennet. Mr. Bennet, as a pastor of the Church of England, I flatter myself that my present overtures of goodwill are highly commendable. And the circumstances of me being the next the entail of the estate of Longbourn will be kindly overlooked on your part and not lead you to reject my proffered olive branch. As for your daughters, I have heard much of their beauty, and in this instance fame has fallen short of the truth. But I doubt not seeing them to be well disposed of in marriage.
Oh, you are very kind, sir. And I wish with all my heart it may prove so, for else they will be destitute enough.
Oh, I am very sensible, madam, as I understand the hardships of my fair cousins. But I can assure the young ladies that I come prepared to admire them. Ooh, but at present I will say no more, but perhaps when we are better acquainted.
Oh, get out!
Thus, in conclusion, may I say, having a good house and a good living as a clergyman, I intend to marry. And, in reconciliation with your family, I propose to choose one of your daughters. You must agree this atonement is the most excellent one, both generous and disinterested on my part.
Oh, indeed!
I much approve your eldest daughter.
Jane?
Oh, indeed. I find her both fetching and decorous. She stood quite nicely, and seniority must be served.
Jane. Sir, as to my younger daughters, I cannot take it upon myself, but I know of no predispositions. Concerning my eldest daughter...
Jane?
Jane.
Oh, Jane.
I feel it incumbent to tell you that she's very likely to be soon engaged.
Oh, okay. Oh, and the next in age?
Oh, Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth, yes. Very forthright and not at all unpresentable.
Done.
To escape Mr. Collins' lectures.
On the high quality and moral fitness of the pastorate of the Church of England.
Papa suggested a stroll to Meryton.
For I suppose them better fitted for a walker than a talker.
In order for that, one must first learn the highest laws to govern as a Christian duty.
And no sooner had I arrived at the regimental trumpery than 3 signs bowed all at once.
To be discovered from within, not from without.
And all 3 asked me to walk out with it.
That no man can become a serviceable servant solely by the written in it, and the principles elucidated.
La, said I am but one young lady, as you can plainly see, when we soon espied, oh, a newly arrived officer of the regiment, to her most gentlemen, like a parent who was introduced to us by an officer already of our acquaintance as...
Mr. Wickham!
His appearance was greatly in his favour.
He has all the best parts of beauty.
A fine countenance.
A good figure.
And a very pleasing address.
Ooh, how do you do? This is a lucky chance indeed. At the officers' table, the Bennets are highly spoken of in their approbations. Miss Lydia and Miss Catherine, are you not? Wrong way around.
Topsy-turvy!
Profoundly sorry. I suppose I would be correct in addressing you as Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Yes, quite correct.
Well, I salute your further address, Miss Bennet.
Our society, sir, is not extensive. I venture we'll meet again.
La, we were talking oh so very agreeably when the sound of motorbikes drew our notice.
And Mr. Bingley and Darcy came riding by.
Mr. Wickham barely touched his hat, which Mr. Darcy hardly deigned to return. What could be the meaning of it?
Before walking on, we naturally adjoined Mr. Wickham to pay us a visit.
With great pleasure indeed. I fear we poor souls lack greatly in feminine instruction. Miss Bennet?
Mr. Wickham.
La, but our sister has made a conquest.
Lydia, I have...
I am very fortunate in my patroness, the non-parallel Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who condescended to take me in hand. What beauty, what elevated style and affability. She is, of course, the proprietress of Rosings and very, 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 very extensive property. Her daughter's indifferent health unhappily prevents her from being here, and I have told Lady Catherine many times, one day has deprived the British court of its brightest ornament.
Absolutely splendid.
Mr. Wickham has arrived.
Mr. George Wickham, Papa. Oh, please.
Delighted.
Parson Collins, Mr. Wickham.
Ah, pleasure to meet you, gentlemen of the cloth. I had a near miss myself.
As Mr. Collins once again held forth.
I have observed to Lady Catherine many times that her charming daughter was born to be a duchess, that of the most elevated rank, to give the highest consequence and not to be adorned by her, but to be brief.
Mr. Collins, you suggested to show me around the grounds.
Please excuse my temerity in accepting your sister's kind invitation with an almost unbecoming alacrity.
It is a great kindness to seek us out. The regiment, I hope, is not unhappily quartered here.
I cannot speak for the regiment. However, may I say I've personally improved my acquaintance with your family.
A courtesy very prettily put.
And sincerely meant.
I could not help noticing, sir, a certain coolness of regard passing between yourself and Mr. Darcy.
Have a keen eye, Miss Bennet.
And a curious one, sir.
Might you tell me, how far is Netherfield from Meryton?
3 miles, perhaps?
Indeed. And how long has Mr. Darcy been staying there?
About a month. He is a man of very large property in Derbyshire, I understand.
His estate there is a noble one. In fact, I've been connected to his family through my infancy. How acquainted are you with Mr. Darcy?
I have spent 4 days in the same house with him, and I think him very disagreeable.
I find your opinion of him would be in general astonish.
Really? He is not at all liked in Hertfordshire.
May I express surprise? Perhaps the world is blinded by his fortune, consequence, and sees as he chooses to be seen.
I should take him, even on my slight acquaintance, to be an ill-tempered man.
I fear I have considerable knowledge of him. The late Mr. Darcy, his father, was obsessively attached to me. I cannot do justice to his kindness. His son and I were both born in the same parish, sharing the same amusements. My father was his father's estate manager. The elder Mr. Darcy knew the church ought to be my profession and promised me the family parish when it came available, or, if not, promised me the voluntary promise of providing for me. Both were countermanded by the young Mr. Darcy after his father's death.
On what grounds?
Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, perhaps he would have borne with me better. But because of his uncommon attachment to me, it irritated him. He had not the temper to bear with such competition in which we stood. In short, his behavior towards me has been scandalous. But I do not trust myself on the matter. I can be hardly fair to him now.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy as bad as this.
Perhaps his actions may be traced towards his considerable pride.
But can such abominable pride as his ever done him good?
Oh, I must owe him to be liberal and generous, displaying hospitality, assisting the tenants, relieving the poor. Filial pride and family pride have done this. But because of his father's preference on me, it pricked that pride and made him my enemy.
I am astonished at his intimacy with Mr. Bingley. Do you know him?
Not at all.
He is a sweet-tempered, amiable, charming man. He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Mr. Darcy can please where he chooses. He does not want abilities.
My judgment would be that he deserves to be publicly disgraced.
Sometime or other it'll be, but it will not be by me. Miss Bennet, allow me to say that this troubling aspect has not made you a whit less delightful.
I must suppose that the relationship you have described will not allow your presence at the upcoming ball at Netherfield.
I do fear there is a discomfort for all that's involved, but make no mistake, Miss Bennet, keenly feel the loss.
Well, whatever he said was well said, and whatever he did was done gracefully.
But, dear sister, I am all astonishment and concern. I know not how to believe Mr. Darcy could be so unworthy of Mr. Bingley's regard.
I can much more easily believe Mr. Bingley's being imposed on than Mr. Wickham should invent such a history of himself.
But it is so distressing. One does not know what to think.
I beg your pardon, one knows exactly what to think.
I know only with certainty that poor Mr. Bingley would have much to suffer if Wickham's charge becomes public.
Poor Mr. Bingley.
I speak only as an observer.
Back at home, Mr. Bingley and his sister came to give their personal invitation for the long-expected ball at Netherfield, which was fixed for the following Tuesday. Well, Mr. Collins...
I assure you that a ball of this kind, hosted by a young man of such character, could have any evil tendencies. And I am so far from objecting to dancing by myself that I take this opportunity, Miss Elizabeth, of soliciting the first 2 dances with you especially.
And it struck me that I had been selected from among my sisters as worthy of being the mistress of Hunsford Parsonage.
I perceive that Elizabeth still longed to see Mr. Wickham among those assembled.
Seeking the conquest of all that remain unsubdued of his heart.
I might title them dances of mortification.
Say something, I'm getting
Might I hope for the next, Miss Bennet?
Well, I hardly think that...
Do not be a simpleton and allow your fancy for Wickham to make you appear unpleasant in the eyes of a man 10 times his consequence.
Well then.
Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving.
The music is played well, do you not think?
And I, feeling so small. I was
It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance, and you ought to make some kind of remark on the size of the room or the number of couples.
I quite assure you that whatever you wish me to say will be said.
Very well. That reply would do for the present. Now we may be silent.
Starting to crawl. Say something, I'm giving up on you.
Do you talk by the rule when you are dancing?
I have always, Mr. Darcy, seen a great similarity in the turn of our minds. We each of unsocial taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak unless we expect to say something that will amaze the whole room and be handed down to posterity with all the eclat of a proverb.
This is no very striking resemblance of your character, I'm sure. How near it may be to mine, I cannot pretend to say.
I have recently had the pleasure of forming a new acquaintance with a childhood friend of yours, a Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends. Whether he is equally capable of retaining them is much less so.
He has been so unlucky to lose your friendship, and in a manner which he's likely to suffer from all his life.
What think you of books, Miss Elizabeth?
I cannot talk of books in a ballroom. My head is full of something else. I remember hearing you say, Mr. Darcy, that you hardly ever forgave. That your resentment, once created, was unappeasable. You were very cautious, I suppose, until it was being created.
I am, yes.
And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice.
May I ask to what these questions tend?
Merely to the illustration of your character. I'm trying to make it out.
And what is your success?
I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as to puzzle me exceedingly.
I can readily believe that reports on me may vary greatly. I would only ask, Miss Bennet, that you would not sketch my character at present, as there is reason to fear that performance would reflect no credit on either.
Say something, I'm giving up on you. Because you know I'm all about that.
Ah, Mr. Darcy. You are, if I am not mistaken, the nephew of my eminent patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who secured for me the living at the Hudsonford Parsonage. Thus, allow me to observe that I consider the clerical office a equal point of dignity is that with the highest rank in the kingdom, provided that a proper humility and behavior is at the same time maintained.
You have neglected your name, sir.
Oh, have I?
You have.
Mr. Collins, sir.
Delighted.
Excellent, most excellent. I have no reason, I assure you, to be dissatisfied with my reception. He answered me with the utmost civility, and overall, I am very much pleased with him.
Though he neglected his name.
Ah, did he?
She said, boys like I little more, but you do all night. You know I won't be no stick figure, silicone Barbie doll. So if that's what you're into, then go ahead and move along. Because you know I'm all about the bass.
I hear you're quite delighted with George Wickham. Oh yes, your sister Jane has been talking with me. Did you know he was the son of late Mr. Darcy Stewart?
I believe he so asserted.
Let me recommend you, however, as a friend, to not give explicit confidence to all of his assertions. And as to Mr. Darcy using him ill, that is perfectly false. For, on the contrary, he's always been remarkably kind to him.
Well, he clearly...
George Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner. I do not know the particulars, but his coming into the country at all is a most insolent thing. Considering his descent, one cannot expect much better.
His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be one and the same. For I have heard you accuse him nothing worse than being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and of that I can assure you he informed me himself.
I beg your pardon. Please excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
Insolent girl.
You step it wonderfully.
Under your instructions, sir.
Well, that at least promises the felicity which a marriage of true affection can bestow.
I'm sure I needed to enumerate the advantages of such a match. Such an advantage living but 3 miles apart.
Mamma,
and such a comfort.
Sadly, we must go.
Miss Elizabeth, it's a great shame we footed it but once.
When at last the guests and officers quit the house, Mamma spoke all the way home of preparations, new carriages, and seeing Jane settled at Netherfield within 3 months. Oh, and Mr. Collins's marriage to Lizzie as well.
May I hope, madam, for the interest in the matter of your penultimate eldest, Elizabeth, I wish to solicit the honor of a private audience with her in the coming morning.
What? Oh, yes, I see, dear me. Yes, certainly. Oh, I'm sure Lizzie will be very happy. I'm sure she can have no objection. A private audience. Come, Kitty, I want you upstairs.
Dear madam, do not go.
Huh? Not go?
Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say to me that anybody need not hear. I'm going away myself.
Oh, nonsense, Lizzie. I desire you will stay where you are. I insist upon you staying and hearing Mr. Collins. Come, Kitty. Oh! Stay.
Your modesty adds only to your other perfections. And my attentions have been too marked to be mistaken, but before I am run away by my feelings, let me first enumerate why it is I wish to marry. First, to set an example of matrimony within my parishment. Second, I believe it greatly adds to a man's well-being. Third, by particular advice and recommendation of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Let her be an active, useful sort of person who makes a small income go a long way. Her very words. You may observe, fair cousin, that I do not reckon the lotus of Lady Catherine the least of my advantages. Your wit and vivacity, I think, are acceptable to her, especially when tempered with the silence and respect which her rank invariably excites. Fourth, as I am to inherit this estate after the death of your honored father, I feel bound to choose a wife from among his daughters, so that the loss of them is as little as possible. And now, nothing remains but for me to assure you, in the most animated language of my affection, to fortune I am perfectly indifferent as to dowry, and I am well aware of your father's finances, and you shall assess yourself that no ungenerous reproach shall ever pass my lips when we are married.
No.
No?
I am very sensible as to the honor of your proposal, but it is impossible for me to do otherwise than decline them.
It is usual for young ladies to reject at first the address of the man they secretly mean to accept.
I do assure you that I'm not one of those young ladies. You could not make me happy. And I am convinced I'm the last woman in the world that can make you so. Were your friend Lady Catherine to know me, she would find me in every regard ill qualified. This matter may be considered therefore as finally settled.
You cannot be serious in your rejection of me. Good sense and financial necessity forbid it. It is your wish to increase my love by suspense, usual practice of elegant females.
I am not, Mr. Collins, an elegant female intending to plague you. I am a rational creature speaking from the truth of her heart. I will not have you. Can I speak plainer?
Oh, you are uniformly charming.
Oh, Mr. Collins, allow me to be the first to congratulate you!
She has begun delightfully with a refusal.
A refusal?
Out of bashful modesty and the genuine delicacy of her character.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you want it immediately! Oh, she is a headstrong, foolish girl and does not know her own interests.
Headstrong.
But I will make her know it.
Headstrong? Foolish. Dear me, if Bezra were not so to force her acceptance, because if liable to such defects of temper, she could not add much to my felicity.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you must come and make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she vows she will not have him.
Pray, excuse me.
I have not the pleasure of understanding you.
And Mr. Collins begins to say he will not have Lizzie. Lizzie! Oh!
And what am I to do on the occasion?
Why tell her you insist upon her marrying him?
Lizzie? Is it true Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage?
It is.
And this offer of marriage you have refused?
I have, sir.
An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
I tell you what, Miss Lizzie, go on this way and you will never get a husband at all. And I'm sure I do not know who is to maintain you when your father is dead.
Please excuse me, but I wish to withdraw my pretensions from your daughter's favor. I have come to believe that her high spirits may not find their perfect expression within the circumscribed life of the parsonage. I have certainly meant well. And if my manner has been in any way reprehensible, then I here beg leave to apologize. I am resigned, but I hope improved. Resignation has never been so perfect as when the blessing is denied begins to lose its value in our estimation.
Miss Lizzie. I shall simply say that I will never speak to you again, and you shall find me as good as my word. I have no pleasure in talking to undutiful children.
The discussion of Mr. Collins' offer was now nearly at an end, but rather than decamp into disarray, he made it known that he was always to have gone on Saturday, and to Saturday he still meant to stay. And the assiduous attentions paid to Lizzie were transferred to Charlotte Lucas, who was visiting, whose civility in listening to him was a seasonable relief to us all.
Miss Jane, this has come from Netherfield.
From Netherfield?
It says that Caroline Bingley and the whole party leaving for town without any intention of coming back again.
I do not pretend to regret anything I shall leave in Hertfordshire, except your society, my dearest friend. It is evident by this that Bingley comes back no more this winter.
It is only evident that Miss Bingley does not mean he should.
I shall read you the passage which particularly hurts me. I shall have no reserves from you. Mr. Darcy is impatient to see his younger sister, and to confess the truth, we are scarcely less eager to meet her again. Georgiana has no equal for beauty, elegance, and accomplishments, and we dare entertain the hope of her being hereafter our sister.
Foolishness, she is a child.
Is it not clear enough? Does it not expressly declare that Caroline neither expects nor wishes me to be her sister, and that she is perfectly convinced of her brother's indifference to me? Can there be any other opinion on the subject?
Yes, there can, for mine is totally different. Will you hear it?
Most willingly.
It is this. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you and wants him to marry Georgiana Darcy. I also suspect that Mr. Bingley's regard was further suppressed by his friend Mr. Darcy's interference. He watched you most narrowly as you danced.
You must not criticise, Lizzie. Perhaps I have imagined Mr. Bingley's regard. Women fancy admiration means more than it does.
And men take care that it should. His sisters influence him as well, Jane, in conjunction with his friend.
Surely she only wishes his happiness.
Oh, she may wish many things beside his happiness, such as an increase in wealth, a consequence, and great connections.
No, Lizzie. I think no ill of him or his sister. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. I have at least the comfort that it was nothing more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself.
Really, you are too good. You wish to think all the world respectable. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it. And every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters. I have come to distrust the appearance of either merit or sense.
Lizzie, you must not tender your happiness on my behalf.
So, Lizzie, I find that your sister is in love. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a girl likes to be a little crossed in love every now and then. You will hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane. Here are officers enough at Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country. Let Wickham be your man. He is a pleasant fellow and would jilt you creditably.
Thank you, sir. But a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune.
Amazement. Within the very week, or in as short a time as Mr. Collins' long speeches would allow, all was settled between him and Charlotte Lucas by way of
domestic arrangement.
And Lizzie feels she accepted him solely from
the pure and disinterested desire of an establishment.
And as Mamma said,
cared not how the establishment was gained.
Charlotte's marriage is unaccountable, in every view unaccountable.
Lizzie, you must not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness.
Engaged to Mr. Collins? My dear Charlotte, impossible.
Why should you be so surprised, my dear Eliza? Do you think it incredible that Mr. Collins should be able to procure any woman's good opinion just because he was not so happy to succeed with you?
Indeed not, but 2 offers of marriage in 3 days.
My dearest Eliza, I am sure when you've had time to think it all over, that you'll be satisfied with me. I'm not a romantic, you know. I never was. You must come visit the parsonage as soon as ever you can.
I tell you, Mr. Collins has been taken in. Worse, Elizabeth, I am sure, is the cause of all the mischief.
No.
I tell you, we are in a pitiable state. Because of the entail, Charlotte Lucas will be the mistress of this house, and I will be forced to make way for her and live to see her take my place in it.
Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I may be the survivor.
in our gloom, Mr. Wickham's society was of material service, and his betrayal by Mr. Darcy was general knowledge. We all agreed that Mr. Darcy was the worst of men.
On the following Monday, the gardeners, my mother's brother and his wife, arrived. He is a sensible, gentlemanlike man, and Mrs. Gardner, as always, enlivened the premises by distributing presents, describing the newest fashions and giving off sage advice.
A young man such as you describe, Mr. Bingley, so easily falls in love with a pretty girl for a few weeks. And just as easily forgets her. Now, as to Mr. Wickham, who you mention far too frequently, I would have you be on your guard.
At present, I am not in love with Mr. Wickham, but I count him as the most agreeable man I ever saw.
Unwise.
But how can I be wiser than so many of my fellow creatures if I'm tempted? Or how am I to even know if it was wisdom to resist? All that I can promise you, therefore, is to not be in a hurry.
I say no more. I shall take Jane with me to London, poor girl, as a change of scene might be of service. It had better have happened to you, Lizzie. You would have laughed yourself out of it sooner. I understand you were to visit the Collinses in their newly married state, and you must visit me as well.
As March was to take me to Hunsford Parsonage, the improvement of spending a night in London made the plan perfect as could be. Jane! Oh, look now, I see London is agreeable to you.
Oh, Lizzie, sit with me.
With every pleasure. You look so well.
Well, I confess myself to be entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. She has not visited me here at London, but when she did come, it was obvious she had no pleasure in it. In fact, she seemed to have come to convince me of her brother's interest in Miss Darcy.
All gentlemen held in my lowest repute. It is said that Mr. Wickham is now the admirer of a certain Miss King.
Oh.
Whose most remarkable charm, I might add, seems to be the acquisition through family mortality of £10,000. And it is at the least indelicate of him to direct his attentions towards her so soon after this event. Oh, you are pale, Elizabeth. Are you ill?
A man in distressed circumstances is not the time for elegant decorums which others might observe. If she does not object to it, why should we?
Her not objecting to it does not justify him.
I have a very poor opinion of young men who live in Derbyshire, and their intimate friends who live in Hertfordshire are not much better. I am sick of them all. Oh, thank heavens I am going tomorrow to the Collinses' parsonage, where I shall find a man who has not one agreeable quality, who has neither manner nor sense to recommend him. Perhaps stupid men are the only ones worth knowing after all.
Bravo! You must accompany Mr. Gardner and myself on a tour of pleasure this summer. Oh, where we shall avoid the sex altogether and regard the landscape.
Oh, my dear Anne, what delight, what felicity. You give me fresh life and vigour. Adieu to the disappointment and spleen. What amend to rocks and mountains. Every object in my next day's journey was new and interesting. The chaise comfortable, the weather delightful, and all conspired for the pleasure of the traveller. At length, the passage was discernible, and Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the gate.
My dearest Eliza, you are welcome and welcome again. Come in immediately. You must be wearied and jostled.
I have heard news of Lady Catherine's delicate consideration and civility inviting us to dine with her at the Rosings the next night but one. Oh, do not make yourself uneasy, fair cousin. Lady Catherine will not think any less of you for being, simply dressed.
The dinner was exceedingly handsome, and when we turned in at the lodge, we saw that Pemberley Park was large.
You must not be surprised that Mr. Darcy will be in attendance, bringing with him a Colonel Fitzwilliam, the younger son of his uncle.
Oh, it is my honour to introduce the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, whose wit, vivacity and condescension makes her the brightest ornament.
Yes, quite so. You are, I believe, Elizabeth Bennet.
I am.
Your father's estate is entailed on Mr. Collins, I think.
For your sake, I'm glad of it, but otherwise I see no occasion for entailing estates from the female line. A word, Mr. Collins?
Miss Bennet, I had not hoped to meet you here.
Nor I.
Allow me to present Colonel Fitzwilliam.
Your beauty oft reporting exceeds, Miss Bennet.
This has not been true, Colonel Fitzwilliam, in all quarters.
Miss Bennet, your family?
My family?
How many sisters have you, Miss Bennet?
I have 4 sisters.
That is a great many. Are you the eldest?
I'm the second.
Are they handsome?
Indeed.
Do your sisters play and sing? Do you draw?
No, not at all.
What? None of you? That is very strange. Has your governess left you?
We never had a governess.
No governess? How could that be? 5 daughters brought up at home without a governess. I've never heard of such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
Not perhaps as you might think.
Then who taught you? Who attended you?
Such of us wished to learn never wanted the means. We were always encouraged to read, and books were always provided. Those who chose to be idle certainly might.
I no doubt, but that is what a governess will prevent. Had I known your mother, I would have advised her most strenuously to engage one. Are any of your younger sisters out?
Yes, ma'am, all.
All 5 at once? Very odd. The younger one's out before the eldest are married.
But really, ma'am, I think it would be very hard upon younger sisters that they should not have their share of society and amusement because the elder may not have the means or inclination to marry early.
Upon my word, you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age?
With the 3 younger sisters growing up, your ladyship can hardly expect me to own to it.
What are you saying, Fitzwilliam? What are you telling Miss Bennet?
We are speaking of music, madam.
Of music? Then pray speak aloud.
I am reminding Miss Bennet of her earlier promise to honour us at the pianoforte.
Ah, yes, pray excuse me. I fear you will not find me a great proficient. Pray, continue your conversation rather than attend me. Let's go, girls.
I often tell young ladies that no excellence in music is to be acquired without constant practice.
You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy. But my courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me.
You could not really believe me to entertain any design of alarming you. I have had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you find great enjoyment in occasionally professing opinions which in fact are not your own.
Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me and teach you not to believe a word I say. Take care, sir, for you are provoking me to retaliate, and such things may come out that will shock your relations to hear.
I'm not afraid of you.
Pray let me hear what you accuse him of.
You shall hear then, but prepare for something very dreadful. The first time of my ever seeing Mr. Darcy was at a ball, and he refused to dance, and more than one young lady was sitting down in want of a partner.
I had not at the time the pleasure of any lady's acquaintance in that assembly, and I'm ill-qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
Should we ask why a man of sense and education who has lived in the world is ill-qualified to recommend himself to strangers?
I have not the talent of conversing easily with those I have never met before.
Well, fortunately for our present here, that is not the case. Strangely and unexpectedly, after our delightful evening at Lady Catherine de Bourgh's, the 2 cousins came often of an afternoon. It was plain that Colonel Fitzwilliam came because he took pleasure in Charlotte's my society. But why Mr. Darcy came so often was more difficult to understand.
If you would not laugh me to scorn, Eliza, I might suggest the possibility of his being partial to you.
The gentleman seldom meets my eyes, and frequently sits there 10 minutes together without opening his lips.
Ah, but he often looks at you quite appraisingly when your look is engaged elsewhere.
Stuff, I'm going for a ramble in the park.
Oh, Miss Bennet.
Oh, Colonel Fitzwilliam. I didn't know you walked this way.
Are you going much further?
No, I should have turned in a moment. Do you certainly leave Kent on Saturday?
Oh, yes, if Darcy does not put it off again.
I do not know anybody who seems more to enjoy the power of doing what he likes than Mr. Darcy.
But so we all do. It is only that he has better means of having it than many others, and that I am at his disposal.
I imagine your cousin brought you down with him for the sake of having somebody at his disposal. I wonder he does not marry to secure the lasting convenience of that kind. But perhaps his sister does well for the present, as she's under his sole care.
Oh no, in fact, I am joined with him in the guardianship of Miss Darcy.
Are you indeed? Young ladies of her age are sometimes a little difficult to manage. And if she has true Darcy spirit, she may like to have her own way.
Indeed, she is one of the most tractable creatures in the world. Oh, and a great favourite of Miss Bingley. I believe you said you know her.
A little. Darcy is uncommonly kind to Mr. Bingley and takes a prodigious deal of care of him.
Well, from something Darcy said, I have reason to think that Bingley is very much indebted to him. It is a circumstance, of course, which Darcy could not wish to be generally known, because if it were to get round to the lady's family, it would be quite an unpleasant thing.
You may, of course, depend on my not mentioning it.
Well, he told me merely that he had, congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend from the inconveniences of a most imprudent marriage. And I would only suspect it to be Bingley, as his open nature may get him into a scrape of that sort.
Please pardon me, but I do not see what right Mr. Darcy had to decide on the propriety of a friend's inclination.
Well, from something Darcy said, I have reason to think that the family had something to do with it. I believe one was a country attorney and the other was a sort of mercantile background. Oh, and perhaps unsuitable mother. Oh, no. But this is all conjecture. Good day, Miss Bennet.
To Jane herself, there could be no possibility of objection. Oh, what loveliness and goodness as she is. Neither can anything be urged against my father, who, though with some peculiarities, has abilities Mr. Darcy himself need not disdain. Of course, my mother. But Mr. Darcy would receive a deeper wound from the want of importance of his friends' connections than from their want of sense. He has been governed by the worst kind of pride, and partly for the wish of retaining Miss Bingley for his sister.
Miss Bennet.
Mr. Darcy?
Might I inquire of your health?
My health?
Yes. As I've not encountered you these past couple of days, I thought I might inquire of your health.
My health, Mr. Darcy, meets all usual standards.
Yes.
Yes.
In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how I ardently admire and love you. I see I dismay you. I am slow, even dilatory. I should have declared myself at an earlier date. But there were, of course, the family obstacles which judgment always opposed to inclination. The general sense of your social inferiority, of it being a degradation of the line. I could not forget my responsibility to an estate, a way of life, a pride of place, which might, given your circumstances, disinclude you, and thus the very ardency I described took place against my will and reason, or rather, in opposition to my character and inclination. But the very strength of my attachment has made it impossible for me to conquer these feelings, and I would only express the hope that these feelings would now be rewarded by your acceptance of my hand. There.
In such cases as this, it is, I believe, the established mode to express a sense of obligation for the sentiments avowed, however unequally they may be returned. It is natural that the obligation should be felt, and if I could feel gratitude, I would now thank you, but I cannot. I have never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly. The feelings which you tell me have long prevented the acknowledgement, can have little difficulty in overcoming it after this explanation.
And this is the reply to which I might have the honor of expecting. I might wish to ask why with such little endeavor and civility I'm thus rejected.
I might as well inquire why, with so evident a design of offending and insulting me, you chose to tell me you liked me against your will, against your reason and even against your character. Was not this some excuse for incivility? If I was uncivil, but I have other provocations. You know I have. Do you think any consideration would tempt me to accept the man who's been the means of ruining, perhaps forever, the happiness of a beloved sister? You divided Mr. Bingley and Jane from each other, or at the very least, yours was the principal means, involving them both in misery of the acutest kind. Can you deny that you've done it?
I have no wish to deny that I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister, or that I rejoice in my success. Towards him I have been kinder than towards myself.
Quite clearly said. But it is not merely this fear which my dislike is unfounded. Your character was unfolded at the recital, which I received many months ago from Mr. Wickham.
You take an eager interest in that gentleman's concerns.
Knowing his misfortunes, who would not feel an interest in him?
His misfortunes?
And of your infliction. You have withheld the advantages which you must know have been designed for him, and yet you treat the mention of his misfortunes with contempt.
And this is your opinion of me. Thank you for explaining it so fully. These bitter accusations might have been better suppressed had I, with greater policy, flattered you into the belief of my being impelled by unqualified, unalloyed inclination, but disguise of every kind is my abhorrence.
The mode of your declaration has not affected me, Mr. Darcy. You could not have made me an offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it. From the very beginning, your arrogance and selfish disdain for the feelings of others have booked an immovable dislike. You are, Mr. Darcy, the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed upon to marry.
You've said quite enough, madam. I perfectly comprehend your feelings. Now forgive me for having taken up so much of your time, and accept my best wishes for your health and happiness.
Meditations, thus proceeded to my favorite walk.
Miss Bennet, I have been wandering the grove for some time, in the hope of meeting you. Will you do me the honor of reading this letter?
Two offences you laid last night to my charge. First, that I detached Mr. Bingley from your sister. And the other, that I had, in defiance of honour, blasted the prospects of Mr. Wickham.
Ah, Miss Bennet, you're well known in Hertfordshire.
I had not been long in Hertfordshire.
Will you think me too forward if I apply myself for a second dance?
Before I observed my friend's behaviour and perceived his most surprising partiality.
Your sister I also watched.
And though her manners were open and engaging, there was no symptom of warm regard or sentiment. She received his attentions, but remained, to my eye, indifferent.
My objections to the marriage proceeded also from other causes of repugnance. Your family's want of propriety, betrayed by your mother's manners, your younger sister's forwardness, and even, forgive me, your father's misplaced wit. All confirm my sense
that I must preserve my friend from a most unhappy connection.
In London, I found his sister's uneasiness.
Has been greatly excited.
And we were alike and sensible that no time should be lost in detaching him.
Bingley has great natural modesty, with a stronger dependence on my judgment than his own.
To convince him he had deceived himself was not difficult.
On this subject, I have nothing more to say and no apology to offer.
With respect to that other more weighty accusation of having injured Mr. Wickham, that I will attempt to refute.
In short, his behaviour towards me has been scandalous.
My father was not only fond of this young man's society, but hoped the church would be his profession.
and intended to provide for a minute. He would situate at the family parsonage and provide a legacy of £1,000. On my father's death, Mr. Wickham wrote to inform me that
I have resolved not to pursue a church living, but to study law, for the £1,000 would be insufficient. I hope you will not find this unreasonable to expect the immediate pecuniary advantage.
the business was soon settled. He resigned all claim to assistance in the church.
And accepted in return £3,000. 3 years later, he applied to me again, having found the law an unprofitable study.
This must be false. This cannot be. He assured me his circumstances were...
exceedingly bad.
Indeed, on both sides, this is only an assertion. And yet, every line confuses my belief of Mr. Darcy's infamy.
You can hardly blame me for refusing his entreaty, and his resentment was so great.
You have betrayed your father's wishes and your own honor, sir.
That every appearance of acquaintance was dropped.
Last summer, he again most painfully obtruded on my notice. My sister Georgiana, whom was taken from school at her wish and established in London.
Ah, Miss Darcy. It is a pleasure to renew your acquaintance.
She was then but 15 and was persuaded to believe herself in love and consented to an elopement.
Fortunately, regarding me as almost a second father, she confessed her plans.
You may imagine what I felt and how I acted.
I wrote to Mr. Wickham in undisguised heat. He left London immediately and alone. His chief object had unquestionably been my sister's fortune of £30,000, and the hope, I think, of revenging himself on me.
In this light, his attentions to Miss King seem solely and hatefully mercenary.
If your abhorrence of me should make my assertions valueless, I direct you to Colonel Fitzwilliam, also guardian of Georgiana, who is aware of every particular described above.
I will only add, God bless you. How humiliating is this discovery? Yet how just a humiliation. Had I been in love, I could not have been more wretchedly blind, but vanity, not love, has been my folly. As to the mention of my family in terms so mortifying, my sense of shame is severe, but the charge strikes too forcibly for denial. Their defects, I fear, seem hopeless beyond remedy. My mother puts herself forward beyond all expectation, while my father does nothing to restrain the uncontrollable giddiness and self-willed carelessness of my younger sisters, only excepting dear Jane. What can I call them but ignorant, idle, and vain? How despicably I have acted. I who have prided myself in the discernment. Till this moment, I never knew myself.
I am glad you are back, Lizzie. Have you any flirting? I was in great hopes that you would have gotten a husband before you got back.
Our sisters have been more than ordinarily silly.
Oh, who? Aunt Philip says Lizzie ought to marry Mr. Collins, but I do not think that there would have been any fun in it. And Jane will be quite the old maid soon. Lord, how I should like to be married before any of you, and then I should chaperone you about to all the balls. Kitty and I've been to the shops.
Oh, I do wish you'd have gone along with us, Mary, for it was such fun. We talked and we laughed so loud that anybody might have heard us 10 miles off.
Far be from it, my dear sister, to depreciate such pleasures. But I confess they would have no charms for me. I should infinitely prefer a book.
Oh. Look here, I bought this bonnet. I do not think that it is very pretty, but I thought I might as well buy it as not.
You see?
Oh, but there were 2 or 3 much uglier in the shop. And when I found some prettier satin to trim it with fresh, I think it will be very tolerable.
Sister, I am heartily sorry that Mr. Darcy should have delivered his sentiments in a manner so little suited to recommend them, but I grieve for the unhappiness your refusal must have given him.
You do not blame me, however, for refusing him.
Blame you? Oh, no. But Wickham, so very bad. 'Tis almost past belief. How unfortunate that you should have used such very strong expressions in speaking of Wickham to Mr. Darcy. for now they appear wholly undeserved.
Well, Lizzie, what is your opinion now of this business of Jane's?
My belief...
He is a very undeserving young man, and I do not believe she shall ever get him now.
Mamma.
Well, my comfort is that I am sure Jane will die of a broken heart, and then he will be sorry for what he has done.
News! Ecstatic! Delish! Wonderful! News! Who that the regiment would leave for Brighton?
I thought my heart should have broken.
My heart!
Oh, but Mamma, I have received an invitation from Mrs. Foster, the wife of the colonel of the regiment, to accompany her
to Brighton. I cannot see what I should not be asked as well.
Shut! You confuse your steps to the Dons Espanol, and you have but one new dress for the new season. That is an unsuitable green.
Lydia will never be easy till she has exposed her qualities in some public place or other, and we can never expect her to do it with so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances.
Oh, Papa! Were you aware of the great disadvantage to us all, which must arise from Lydia's unguarded and imprudent manner, nay, which has already arisen from it?
What? Has she frightened away some of your lovers?
I have no such injuries to resent, but, dear father, if there is no check to her exuberant spirits, she will soon be beyond the reach of amendment.
Oh, pooh! Yes? Boo!
And Kitty will follow wherever Lydia leads.
Papa has said that I may. Indeed, going to Brighton presents every possibility of earthly happiness.
Where you may play the common flirt with at least 6 officers at once.
I tell you all, I shall not dine or ever leave my room if you do not let me go!
Lydia! We shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go to Brighton.
Mr. Wickham has arrived to say his goodbyes. There's the regiment tomorrow to camps for Brighton.
Oh, but Mr. Wickham, I will not say my goodbyes, for Papa has agreed that I may accept Mrs. Foster's invitation for an extended visit.
Oh, to be my pleasure, if asked, to introduce you to Brighton and share the historical views. Miss Elizabeth.
Mr. Wickham?
Am I in disgrace, Miss Bennet?
I do not rightly understand you.
I have always admired your understanding.
Have I mentioned I met Colonel Fitzwilliam and Mr. Darcy at Rosings? You know Colonel Fitzwilliam, I believe.
In passing, you saw Mr. Darcy frequently.
Yes, almost every day. I believe Mr. Darcy improves on acquaintance.
Indeed. Is it the address he improves? I hope dare not he improves in essentials.
I mean it from knowing him better. His disposition was better understood.
I must rejoice him that he is wise enough to even assume the appearance of what is right. I deter him from such a foul misconduct from which I have suffered by. Well, I must leave you. We're on the march. A last word on Mr. Darcy. His manners, being in a state of improvement, may be imputed towards his new affability. A match with the daughter of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. A match long contemplated by both families as the growth of their estate and the continuance of their honourable lines. Goodbye, Miss Bennet. I fear we won't see each other again, but I wish you good fortunes to whatever your inclinations lie.
The departure of the regiment, including many acquaintances, wrapped a cloak of gloom and disinclination around our domestic circle.
Oh, Lydia has promised to write very often, but her letters are always very short.
Where such and such officers had attended them.
Where she had seen such beautiful ornaments as made her quite wild.
And how she had purchased another new gown and another new parasol.
And my constant hope of the tour to the lakes was the object of my happiest thoughts.
My dear Elizabeth, our plans, due to Mr. Gardner's business, must be somewhat curtailed in extent. We must give up the lakes and substitute a more contracted tour. Had you set your heart on seeing the lakes?
Well, I own they were an attraction.
I fear we confined to Derbyshire, though it leaves us the delights of Warwick, Kenilworth, Lamberton, and of course, Pemberley.
Oh, Pemberley.
The Darcy estate.
Yes, I recall.
If it were merely a fine house richly furnished, I should not care about it myself. But the grounds are delightful.
The grounds, yes, but is not the family done for the summer?
No, indeed not, you goose. For they summer always in London. Elizabeth.
The journey was for scenery splendid. When we turned in at the lodge, we saw that Pemberley Park was large.
Contains quite a variety of ground.
Glorious woods.
Eh?
Woods!
The house sits well in rising ground.
Wonderful stream for fishing.
I own I have never seen such natural beauty, so that it contradicted by an awkward taste.
You are very welcome. The master is, of course, absent, but we expect him tomorrow with a large party of friends. We are instructed to show the house if you would like.
Oh, most kind indeed.
Is your master much at Pemberley, is he?
Not so much as I could wish, sir.
Have a look at the stream, eh?
Please to step in. That above the grand fireplace would be my master. Drawn perhaps 8 years ago?
A handsome face, but Lizzie, you can tell us whether it's like or not.
Does the young lady know Mr. Darcy?
I do.
And do you not think him a most handsome gentleman, ma'am?
Yes, very handsome.
He is the best master as I've ever lived. I have never had a cross word with him in my life.
Mr. Darcy, you mean?
Yes, ma'am. Go as you please. See what you like.
In what an amiable light does this place him, though not quite consistent with his behaviour towards our poor friend.
Is it possible we deceived? Perhaps Aunt may view the grounds?
Oh, with the greatest pleasure. Oh, the landscape, the lawn, the river, all in harmony with the buildings. I am quite swept away.
Oh.
Oh. Ah!
Huh. Miss Bennet, this is a most welcome surprise.
Indeed, most welcome.
And might I inquire of your health and that of your family?
In all regards, well.
Would you do me the honor of introducing me to your friends?
Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, may I present Mr. Darcy?
Charmed.
Delighted.
My uncle and aunt.
That, of course, only adds to the honor.
A wonderful stream, Mr. Darcy.
Quite-
Capital angling, I suspect.
Yes, quite satisfactory, Mr. Gardner. Please, should you continue in the neighborhood, do me the pleasure of fishing here as often as you choose. I can easily provide the requisite tackle and direct you to those parts of the stream where there is often most sport.
Eh?
Best sport?
Very generous, sir.
Very generous indeed.
Please exempt our forwardness in walking the grounds. Your housekeeper informed us he would certainly not be back until tomorrow.
I have preceded my party to arrange their comfort. Now, among them are some who claim acquaintance with you. Mr. Bingley and his sister, and one who more particularly wishes to be known to you. Will you allow me, or do I ask too much, to introduce your acquaintance to my sister during your stay in Lambton?
I am delighted by this compliment.
Ah,
Yes.
yeah.
Great pleasure.
Very well behaved, polite, and unassuming.
There is something a little aloof in him. To be sure, Lizzie, he is not handsome, but his features are perfectly good. How came you to tell us he was so disagreeable?
Well,
Oh, disagreeable.
Indeed not. At worst, a little whimsical in his civilities.
My dearest daughter, the meetings and introductions suggested by Mr. Darcy took place 2 days following and excited my lively attentions. I had conceived, you may say, a suspicion of Mr. Darcy and my niece, which on that occasion grew to a full conviction that one of them at least knew what it was to love. Of Lizzie's sensations, I remained a little in doubt. Oh, but that the gentleman was overflowing with admiration was evident enough.
Thus, dearest Jane, in speaking of your supposed rival, Miss Darcy, I saw no looks between her and Mr. Bingley that spoke of particular regard. He also asked me with great interest if all my sisters were still at Longbourn, which I took to mean inquiry as to your married state. Miss Bingley continues her dislike in me. Georgiana Darcy was greatly civil, but very shy.
Oh, something came for you, miss.
Oh.
Thought you might be wanting it.
News from Jane and very welcome.
Brought it to you then.
Dearest Lizzie,
Colonel Foster has informed us that Lydia has run off to Scotland with one of his officers. And to confess the truth, Lizzie, it is with Wickham.
Worse still,
imprudent as a marriage between our poor Lydia and Wickham may be,
we are now frantic to be assured it has taken place at all. But now we hear they are not gone to Scotland, but to London.
And there is reason to believe
that he never intended to marry Lydia at all.
And Colonel Forster.
This Wickham is not a man to be trusted.
Father is going to London with Colonel Forster to try to discover her. And what he means to do, I know not.
He shall shoot the scoundrel through the heart, and we shall all be ruined.
Adieu.
Oh!
I cannot help earnest begging you to come as soon as possible.
Oh, where is my aunt? I must find her this moment of business. It cannot be delayed.
Good God, what is the matter?
I've an instant to lose.
You cannot go alone. A servant, shall I get you one?
No. Oh, I know.
You are quite ill.
No, I thank you. Only the dreadful news. My younger sister has left all her friends, has eloped under the power of Mr. Wickham. You know him too well to doubt the rest.
Is it absolutely certain?
Certain. My father has gone to London, and I'm sure Mr. Gardner will assist, but how is such a man to be worked on? How are they even to be discovered?
Well, if there is anything...
Most kind.
Anything that I could say or do that would offer some form of consolation in this time of distress,
We must go at once. Pray apologize for us to Miss Darcy.
Dear me, it seems your company has fled the grounds in disarray.
Your pardon?
How very ill Miss Eliza Bennet looked this morning, Mr. Darcy. Never in my life have I seen anyone so much altered as she is since the winter.
She has grown so brown and
coarse.
This is no miraculous consequence of travelling in the summer.
I particularly recollect you saying one night, she, a beauty, I should as soon call her mother a wit. But afterwards she seemed to improve on you. I believe you thought her rather pretty at one time.
That was when I first met her, yes. Now I consider her the handsomest woman in my acquaintance.
Oh. I had never perceived while the regiment was in Hertfordshire that Lydia had any partiality for Wickham. But she only wanted encouragement to attach herself to anybody. Oh, the mischief of neglect and mistaken indulgence towards such a girl. A family so deranged, a father absent, a mother incapable of excursion. And it is all my fault, knowing what I did, that I did not make the knowledge public. Has anything been heard of the fugitives?
Not yet. But now that my dear uncle has come, I hope all will be well.
Do you suppose them to be in London?
Yes, they went on Tuesday.
Oh, if I had been able to carry my point and going to Brighton with all the family, this never would have happened.
Oh,
Why did the forces let her out of their sight? Oh. And now Mr. Bennet will fight Wickham wherever he meets him. Oh, I do not know what we shall do.
Eh?
Not know what we shall do.
Do not give way to useless alarm. I will go to London, calm my brother, and consult together what is to be done.
Well, this is a most unfortunate affair. But we must stem the tide of malice and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation. You see, Mary thinks it's all a book.
Lydia wrote yesterday saying that if we knew where she was going...
You would all laugh! What a good joke it will be when I write to Mamma and sign my name Lydia Wickham. I hope you all drink to our good journey.
Thoughtless Lydia! But at least it shows that she was serious in the object of her journey. Whatever he might afterwards persuade her to, it was not on her side of the scheme of infamy. Oh, my poor father, what he must have felt.
I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word.
Mr. Bennet shocked. I was taken ill immediately. Indeed, I had to be carried to my room twice. Oh.
Father!
Oh, dear Mr. Bennet!
Oh, Father, what you must have endured.
It has been my own doing, and I ought to feel it.
You must not be too severe upon yourself.
No, Lizzie. Let me once in my life feel how much I've been to blame. Or perhaps I will differ it till Kitty runs away.
Well, I'm not going to run away, Papa. If I should ever leave for Brighton, I'd behave far better than Lydia.
They are concealed in London.
From Uncle Gardner in London.
Oh, indeed, I had palpitations!
I have seen them both.
Thank heaven.
They are not married, nor can I find there was any intention of being so.
Water! Oh.
However, I hope it will not be long before they are.
Not long. See, there she is, a good girl. Not long.
Hush, Mrs. Bennet.
All that is required of you is to assure your daughter, by settlement, her equal share of the £5,000 secured among your children after your decease.
And enter into an engagement of allowing her, during your lifetime, £100 per annum.
Is it possible? Can it be possible that he will marry her?
So Wickham is not so undeserving as we once thought him.
Well, the terms, I suppose, must be complied with.
Oh, exactly! You must write, Mr. Bennet. Inscribe this minute. Oh, they must marry.
And right I will, but there are two things I want very much to know. How much money your uncle has laid down to bring it about, and how am I ever to pay him?
Money? My uncle... What do you mean, sir?
I mean that no man in his senses would marry Lydia for 100 during my lifetime and 50 after I'm gone. Wickham's a fool if he thinks he can take her for a farthing less than £10,000.
And Mr. Gardner could pay such a sum.
Indeed, he could not, nor I repay it.
Oh, you must write, Mr. Bennet. Oh, inscribe this minute. This is delightful indeed. Oh, she will be married. Oh, my dear, dear Lydia. I long to see her. Oh, my good, kind brother. I long to see her and dear Wickham too.
Dear Wickham.
But the clothes. Oh, the wedding clothes. Oh, we must see to it. I will make the arrangements myself. Oh, ring the bell, Kitty. Oh, we must have the carriage. Oh, my dear, dear Lydia, how merry we shall be together when we meet. Oh, calico, muslin, cambric. Oh, I will manage it all.
Mr. Gardner wrote that Wickham had resolved on quitting the militia and would enter the regular army, now under the command of General Trott, now quartered in the north. After our sister's wedding day, the couple returned to Longbourn, and the family assembled to receive them. Well, congratulate me, sisters. It is a great while since I've been here. Good gracious, I'm sure when I went away, I had no idea of being married. Though I thought it would be very good fun if I was. Oh, dear Jane, I take your place now. You must go lower, for I am a married woman. And what do you think of my husband? Is he not a charming man? All of my sisters must go to Brighton now, for that is the place to get husbands.
I thank you for my share of the favour, but I do not particularly like a way of getting a husband.
La, you are so strange. But I must tell you how it all went off. Lydia. We were married, you know, in St. Clements, because Wickham's lodgings were in that parish. And it was settled that we were to all be there by 11 o'clock. Well, just as the carriage came to my door, my uncle was sent away on business, and I was so frightened that the wedding must needs be put off. But then I recollected Mr. Darcy would do just as well.
Mr. Darcy?
Give you away. Oh, yes. He was to come there with Wickham, you know, but... Oh, gracious me. I quite forgot. I ought not to have said a word. It was supposed to be such a secret.
If it were to be a secret, say not another word.
Most certainly, we will ask you no more questions.
Indeed, for then I should tell all, and then Wickham would be so angry with me.
But are my suspicions concerning Mr. Darcy's actions correct?
Lizzie, really, if you were indeed so innocent and ignorant, I must be more explicit.
Oh dear.
Mr. Darcy called to tell Mr. Gardner he had found out where Wickham and your sister were. Mr. Darcy professed that it was owing to himself that Wickham's worthlessness had not been well known.
Oh, but not brought on by himself. Lydia would...
Oh, Lydia, indeed.
Lydia would be Lydia still.
Mr. Darcy asked why he did not marry your sister at once.
Because we are not rich.
Indeed, Wickham still cherished the hope of making his fortune by marriage in some other country. Mr. Darcy then settled upon him a large sum for his acquiescence.
I knew it.
And made Mr. Gardner acquainted with it. Lizzie, where are you going?
To speak with father.
Lizzie, this must go no further than yourself or Jane at most. Mr. Darcy wants neither the act or the sum known.
But you have told me.
I have, yes.
Miss Bennet, I fear I interrupt you.
You do, yes.
Ah.
But it does not follow that the interruption must be unwelcome.
Well, I'm sorry if it's... I find from your aunt that you... And you've talked to the housekeeper, I suppose.
Yes.
What did she say?
That you were gone in the army and she was afraid had not turned out well.
Did Mr. Darcy ever introduce you to his sister?
He did.
And do you like her?
Very much.
She'll turn out well.
I dare say she will. She has got over the most trying age.
You think ill of me, do you not, Miss Bennet?
I'm very glad you have married my sister, Mr. Wickham. How should you like making sermons?
Exceedingly well, but it was not meant to be. I'll leave you to your thoughts.
Come, Mr. Wickham. We are brother and sister, you know. Do not let us quarrel about the past. In the future, I hope we should always be of one mind.
You are a generous spirit, sister.
Oh, yeah!
He's as fine a fellow as I ever saw. He simpers and smirks and makes love to us all.
Oh, I often think there is nothing so bad as parting with friends. One seems so forlorn without them.
Mr. Bingley is coming down, Mama!
Oh, wonderful news! I mean, he's nothing to us, and I'm sure I never want to see him again. But he's always welcome to Netherfield, and who knows what might happen.
I assure you that the news does not affect me with either pleasure nor pain.
If he wants our society, let him seek it. He knows where we live.
But you will wait on him, of course.
I will not go running after neighbours every time they go away and come back again.
I begin to worry that he comes at all. I could see him with a perfect indifference, but I can hardly bear to hear it thus perpetually talked of. My mother means well, but she does not know. No one can know how much I suffer from what she says.
I wish I could say something to comfort you, but it is wholly out of my power.
Mr. Bingley is entered the paddock and is riding towards the house!
Do you conjure yourself the smile of expectation?
Let us first see how he behaves, then it will be early enough for expectation.
And there is a gentleman with him, Mamma.
Oh, some acquaintance or other, my dear. I'm sure I do not know.
It looks like that what's his name? That tall, proud man.
Good gracious, Mr. Darcy! And so it is, I vow. Well, any friend of Mr. Bingley's will always be welcome here. But else, I must say, I hate the very sight of him.
Ah, Mr. Darcy.
The gentlemen were received with tolerable ease, and a propriety of behaviour I thought equally free from any symptom of resentment or any unnecessary complaisance.
Oh, Mr. Bingley! It has been a long time since you went away.
Far too long in my own opinion.
I began to be afraid you would never come back again.
Mrs. Bennet?
Miss Lucas is married and settled, one of my own daughters.
A matter of the greatest congratulations.
It is a delightful thing, to be sure, to have a daughter well married. Mr. Wickham has taken her down to Newcastle with his regiment, a place too far northward in my estimation.
Indeed. Excellent shooting this season, eh, Darcy?
When you have killed all your own birds, Mr. Bingley, I beg you will come here and kill all of ours. You are our visit in my debt, Mr. Bingley. For when you went to town last winter, you promised to take a family dinner with us as soon as you returned.
To be remedied at the first opportunity. Hey, Darcy.
You have been quite silent, Mr. Darcy. I hope you are well.
Quite well. Very well.
And then they went away.
Why, if Darcy came only to be grave, silent, and indifferent, did he come at all?
Now that this first meeting is over, I feel perfectly easy. Obviously, on both sides, we only met as perfect and indifferent acquaintance.
Oh, Jane, take care.
Lizzie, you do not think me so weak as to be in danger now?
I think you are in very great danger of making as much in love with you as ever. A man who was once refused. How could I ever be foolish enough to expect a renewal of his love? Is there one among the sex who would not protest against such a weakness as a second proposal to the same woman? Is there no indignity so abhorrent to their feelings?
Mr. Bingley called again on Friday.
Having once been on this road to happiness, there was nothing on the side of prudence to stop him or make his progress slow.
And he called again the following Tuesday.
And it was not possible that the encouragement from Jane should be long wanting.
And again Thursday week!
Oh, I begin to think there is something in this, Jane.
Mr. Bingley has arrived and is looking quite serious.
Ah, Mr. Bingley! What a memorable surprise.
What is the matter, Mamma? What do you keep winking at me for?
I did not wink at you, Kitty. Come, Mary, Kitty. I want to speak to you.
Mr. Bingley, you write excellently.
Oh, Elizabeth, I very much wish to consult you. I want to speak to you.
Miss Bennet. Try that again. Miss Bennet, might I venture your given name?
Oh, indeed, you might if I might venture yours.
Smashing. Top of the hill, really. Jane, I wish to express to you how very great my esteem for you is.
I see.
Oh, by heavens. I really must mean affection. I really must. Miss Bennet? Oh, Jane. If you would do me the honor of...
I will! Oh, and with a very full heart. But perhaps before a fuller expression, you might prefer a word with my father.
Your father? Well, this is top of the hill, no mistaking. I will speak with him at once. Please don't move so much as a ribbon.
I shall endeavour to be very, very still.
Oh, dear.
Lizzie, what?
Oh, 'tis too much, by far too much. Oh, I do not deserve it. Oh, a catch. A veritable catch. Oh, I am ecstatic.
You are a good girl. I have not a doubt of your doing well together. You are each of you so complying, nothing will ever be resolved. So easy, every servant will want to cheat you. And so generous, you will always exceed your income.
Exceed their income? Why, Mr. Bennet, what are you talking of? He has 4,000 or 5,000 yet, and very likely more.
Oh, Lizzie, why am I thus singled out for my family and blessed above them all? If I could but see you as happy.
If you were to give me 40 such men, I could never be as happy as you. Till I have your disposition, your goodness, I could never have your happiness. No, let me shift for myself. And if I have very good luck, I may meet with another Mr. Collins in time.
Oh, indeed!
Ma'am, I have no notion of how to proceed, but it's Lady Catherine de Bourgh coming to call.
No!
Yes.
Oh, I am astonished beyond all expectation! Oh, God. Sit down! It's fine.
I have shown myself in.
Well,
You're very welcome, Lady Catherine.
I hope you're well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother?
Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet.
And these, I suppose, are your sisters?
Oh, yes, madame. My youngest is all lately married.
This must be a most inconvenient sitting room for the evening in summer. The windows are full west.
Oh, indeed. We never sit to
Miss Bennet, there seems to be a prettyish kind of little wilderness on one side of your lawn. I shall be glad to take a turn of it, if you will favour me with your company. You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reasoning for my journey hither.
Indeed, you are mistaken. I cannot account for the honour.
However insincere you may choose to be, you will not find me so. My character has ever been celebrated for its sincerity and frankness. I was told that not only was your sister at the point of being most advantageously married, but that you would in all likelihood be united with my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Though I know it to be a scandalous falsehood, I've come to make my sentiments known to you.
If you believed it untrue, I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far.
To have the report universally contradicted, can you declare that there is no foundation to it?
Your ladyship may ask questions which I shall not choose to answer.
This is not to be borne.
Your ladyship has declared it impossible.
But your arts and allurements may, in a moment of infatuation, make him forget what he owes to himself and all his family. You may have drawn him in.
If I have, I shall be the last person to confess it.
Miss Bennet, I am unaccustomed to such language as this. I am entitled to know all his dearest concerns.
But you are not entitled to know mine.
Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now what do you have to say?
Thus, you have no reason to suppose he'd make an offer to me.
Of his earliest hours, his mother and I planned the union, and he is destined for his cousin.
But what is that to me? If there is no other objection to my marrying your nephew, I shall certainly not be kept from it, knowing his mother and aunt wish him to marry Miss de Bourgh.
Honour, decorum, prudence, nay, interest forbid it! Your alliance will be a disgrace. You have neither family connections nor fortune. Your name will never be mentioned by any of us.
These are heavy misfortunes. But the wife of Mr. Darcy will have no cause to repine.
Obstinate, headstrong girl, I have not been in the habit of such brooking disappointment.
That will make your ladyship's situation more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me.
Tell me once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And do you promise me to never enter into such an engagement?
I will make no promise of the kind. I must beg, therefore, to be importuned no farther on the subject.
Not so hasty, if you please. To the objections I have already urged, I have another to add. I am no stranger to the particulars of your youngest sister's infamous elopement.
Lady Catherine!
A patched-up business at the expense of your father and uncle.
I must ask
Is such a girl to be my nephew's sister? Is her husband, who is the son of his late father's steward, to be his brother? Oh, heaven and earth, of what are you thinking? Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?
You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg to return to the house.
You are resolved to ruin him in the opinion of all his friends and make him the contempt of the world against the claims of duty, honour, and gratitude.
Neither duty, honour, nor gratitude has any possible claim on me in the present instance. And with the resentment of his family or the indignation of the world, if the former were excited by his marrying me, it would not give me one moment's concern. And the world in general would have too much sense to join in the scorn.
Very well. I shall now know how to act. Do not imagine, Miss Bennet, that your ambition will ever be gratified. I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. I am most seriously displeased.
Will Lady Catherine not come in again and rest herself?
She did not choose it. She would go.
She is a fine-looking woman and prodigiously civil. I suppose she only came to tell us the Collinsons were well. I suppose she had nothing in particular to say to you, Lizzie.
Nothing particular.
Lizzie, I have received a letter this morning that has astonished me. I had no idea that I had 2 daughters on the brink of matrimony. The letter is from Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins?
Your daughter Elizabeth, it is not long presumed, will no longer bear the name of Bennet after her eldest sister has resigned it.
And the chosen partner of her fate may be reasonably looked up upon as one of the most illustrious persons in all the land.
Can you possibly guess, Lizzie, who is meant by this? Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. But Lizzie, you look as if I've surprised you. Is it not rich? Are you not diverted?
Oh, I am excessively diverted, but this is so strange.
Yes, that is what makes it amusing. His indifference and your pointed dislike make it so delightfully absurd.
Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy's here.
And most expressly to see you.
Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy, I can no longer help thanking you for the unexampled kindness to my poor sister. Were it known to the rest of my family, I should have a meal of my own gratitude to express.
If you are to thank me, let it be for yourself alone. Your family owes me nothing. As much as I respect them, I believe I thought only of you. You were too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My wishes and affections are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me forever.
Mr. Darcy, my feelings have undergone so material a change since the period you allude to as to make me receive the gratitude your
Present assurances.
Exactly.
I am.
You are?
I am indeed, yes. Very much so. I believe my aunt has been to see you.
She has.
As you may know, my feelings are completely contrariwise. I hope you spoke to her quite frankly.
Yes. You know enough of my frankness to believe me capable of that. After abusing you so abominably to your face, I could have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations.
What did you say of me that I did not deserve? My previous behavior to you has merited the severest reproof. It was unpardonable.
The conduct of neither, if strictly examined, will be irreproachable. But since then we have both, I hope, improved in our civility.
When I was a child, I was taught what was right, but not how to correct my temper. I was given good principles, but left to follow them in my own pride and conceit. By you, I was properly humbled. I came to you without a doubt of my reception, and you showed me how insufficient were all my pretensions to please a woman worthy of being pleased.
I am almost afraid of asking what you thought when we met at Pimberley. You blamed me for coming.
No, I felt only the pleasure of surprise. My object then was to show you by every civility that your reproofs had been attended to. How soon other wishes introduced themselves, I can hardly tell, but I believe it was in about half an hour of seeing you.
Other wishes?
Other wishes, yes.
And Mr. Bingley?
On the evening before my going to London, I told him all that had occurred to make my previous interferences in his affairs absurd and impertinent. Moreover, I told him that I felt no doubt of their happiness together.
Did you speak from your own observation or merely from my information last spring?
I narrowly observed her and was convinced of her affection, yes.
And what do you narrowly observe in me, Mr. Darcy?
That I can hardly tell as expected. What have I done?
I sincerely beg your pardon. You have not yet learned to be laughed at, but it was rather too early to begin.
Pray, excuse me, I must speak to your father.
I have given him my consent. I now give him to you, if you are resolved to have him. But I know your disposition, Lizzie. You would be neither happy nor respectable unless you truly esteemed your husband. You would scarcely escape discredit and misery.
I do esteem him, father. He has grown exceedingly in my estimation. His own affection is not the work of a day, but has stood the test of many months' suspense. He is the object of my choice.
This is an evening of wonders indeed.
Oh, good gracious! Lord bless me! Only think, dear me, Mr. Darcy. And is it really true? Who would have thought it? Oh, my sweetest, how great and rich you will be! What jewels and carriages you will have! Oh, Jane is nothing to it. Nothing at all. 3 daughters married, 10,000 a year. Oh, Lord, what will become of me? I shall go distracted.
Oh, now I am quite happy, for you will be as happy as myself. Were it not for his love for you, I should have always esteemed him. But now, as Bingley's friend and your husband, there can be only you and Bingley more dear to me. Go. Go.
And now, Mr. Darcy, pray continue.